These forests are haunted, but not just by ghosts. Are you ready to be stalked? This world is a strange one. I've been reading a lot of Missing 411. It's a great book series if you haven't read it. It details hundreds of missing person cases in the woods. These cases are bizarre as they remain unsolved, yet it seems like something or someone is taking people. But what could it be? Could you be the next person it takes? Well, these 6 allegedly true stories might just give us some insight as to what's out there, insight on the monsters that lurk in the woods and take people who are then never seen again. But first, I've been reading a lot of comments lately, and though I can't reply to as many people as I like, I just want to thank everyone so much for their support. Seriously, out of all the time I've been on YouTube, I've never seen a community so kind, and I definitely never imagined I'd have one of my own. I just want to thank all of you for helping this channel grow and for giving me the best job in the world. All I ask is that you share my videos as they're released, so that we can show the world all the creepy mysteries that exist abound. Thank you. Now, let's sit in the woods for a while and see what crosses our path. Number 1. Bigfoot on the Wooded Trails. Submitted by HANA13. My friend and I love going on paranormal hunts, but she's blind in one eye, so I have to be the leader of our investigations. For identity and safety, I'm going to call her Luna. This happened last year when fall still felt like summer. Luna and I were traveling along the Youghiogheny River trails up in Pennsylvania with an old friend of ours, originally trying to find the abandoned miners' town, but we got more than we expected. Seeing how we couldn't find the ghost town when the sun set, we decided to head back. It was best not to get stuck in the woods at night. With flashlights in hand, we began to hike back to our Jeep parked about 2 miles away from our destination. Now, our old friend was a huge Bigfoot fanatic and would constantly tell us stories of how he wished he'd run into one. Honestly, it would drive us insane at times, and at the moment walking through the woods, we tried to ignore it. While walking down the dirt path, we kept hearing twigs snapping in the distance. There were branches moving, quick yelping noises, and small rocks from the cliff hitting the ground. Something was out there, but I ignored it, thinking it might have been the wind as it picked up and causing all the trees to creak. But I was dead wrong. Our acquaintance stopped dead in his tracks and harshly whispered for us to stop. We were confused and a little bit creeped out. Luna and I looked over to him to see what was wrong. We expected him to be bending down to tie his shoes or something, but when we turned to look, we saw him and he was pale as a ghost. Look up ahead," he stammered to us. As we turned around slowly, about 200 feet or so down the trail, we saw a very large and tall, brownish-black mass standing still in the middle of the road. From the distance we were from this thing, we thought he stood about 8 to 10 feet tall, and he was very fuzzy. Now, bears are very common in parts of Pennsylvania, but none of the bears we had were that big or tall. Putting our lights on the ground, we didn't know what to do, and we all assumed flashing the thing with our flashlights would just piss it off. So we stood there, watching it as it watched us. It was a terrifying standoff. I swear 10 minutes had gone by before the large creature turned to the left and began to head over towards the hillside to the river. Now folks, don't do what we did next, as many animals' instincts kick in if you run. But what we did next was bolt as fast as we could down the trail out of there, holding Luna's hand tightly in mine the whole way so that she wouldn't fall behind or get lost. All this time we heard the yelping again, this time knowing where the source of it came from. It only made me run faster. Eventually we found the white Jeep waiting for us, and we drove out of there like a bat out of hell. I had always been a believer in Bigfoot, but I never imagined I would see one in my entire life. and I didn't think it'd be so creepy. Number 2. Shadow Dogs, submitted by LADYNYX. This happened when I was 16. I lived in the middle of nowhere, and the only real choices in entertainment were video games or exploring the local woods. One day, my friend Danielle and I decided to go explore the large patch of woods nearby. We had become bored of playing our favorite game on the GameCube at the time, so it would be a nice change of pace. We had decided to explore in a different direction than we usually did, and we had been walking for about 20 minutes and had found some interesting things, like a little stream that had crawfish in it. We were pretty excited about our new discoveries. At one point, I decided to climb up on a large rock. It was sitting on top of a little hill, and I noticed that there was a large tree standing in the distance. It stood above all the others around it, and from where I stood, it looked like it had been burnt to charcoal. This was not something I'd ever seen before, and I thought it was strange and I wanted to check it out. I called my friend over and I showed her the tree. I told her that we should go over there. She looked very unsettled when I announced it to her, and even more so when she saw it herself. She said it was creepy, and that it was far enough away that the sun would be starting to set by the time we got there. I told her that the tree was probably just struck by lightning at some point, and I said that it would be cool to see up close. My friend finally decided to go along with me in the end, and we set off in the direction we had seen the tree. It must have been about another 20 minutes or so, and the closer we got to the tree, the quieter the forest became around us. This made the both of us get nervous. We could tell something was not right, and my friend began to plead to me that we needed to turn around. But even though I was nervous, I was also very curious. After another few minutes of walking, we reached that tree. It sat in the middle of an area where everything was dead, completely dead. In fact, the dead area, bizarre enough, was almost in a perfect circle. We walked around, quiet and gawking at the sight. The sunset was tinting everything orange, and it was completely silent. The air itself felt tense around us, like the feeling you get when you're eagerly awaiting something, and not a good something. I decided I wanted to get a closer look at the tree. It was only about 8 feet away from us, in the center of this circle. I moved a step into the circle, and my friend grabbed my arm and asked me what I was doing. I told her I wanted to get a closer look. She shifted uncomfortably and said, "Fine, just do it quickly. I want to go back home." As soon as I stepped into the circle, the hairs on the back of my arms and neck stood on end. I still stubbornly continued forward, heading towards the blackened tree. When I got within 3 feet of the tree, I heard something growling. Yes, clearly something was growling. Immediately, I looked over to where the noise was coming from. There appeared to be dense shadows cast against the gnarled roots of the tree. There were several of them in the shape of dogs. Of course, I kept glancing around trying to find these animals, but slowly and dreadfully I realized that nothing alive was casting these shadows. Even still, the shadows began to move, and they seemed to only get blacker by the second. I've never seen anything that dark in my entire life. Looking around me, I counted 6 of these shadowy creatures, all snarling at me. I backed up slowly the way I had came, and these shadow dogs were slowly stalking towards me. When I reached the edge of the circle, Danielle grabbed my arm forcefully and we began running. She almost dragged me away for a few seconds until I caught up with her. We both just ran as fast as we possibly could. And when I heard something crunching in the leaves behind us and the snarling still, my heart sank. I thought I was going to die. At one point, I slipped and fell, and I could see those shadows so close behind us, I thought they were going to snap and catch me by the shirt. But Danielle caught me, and we kept running. They chased us all the way back to her house, and when we got there, we literally threw ourselves through the door, and we locked it the moment we got inside. We then proceeded to make sure there were no open windows or unlocked doors or any way for anything to get into the house. We were gasping for air and covered in sweat, and I think we were both crying. Eventually, I cautiously walked over to the window that overlooked her backyard, and I peeked out of the curtains as slowly as I could. and at the very back edge of her yard stood those shadow dogs. They began to walk forward, closer to the house. I closed the curtain, and we stayed up all night, listening to the occasional growling from just outside the house. I don't think either of us have cried more than we did that night. The next morning, we carefully looked outside to see if it was safe, and thankfully those shadow creatures were gone. We never went back to that part of the woods again, especially after we went outside with my friend's mother later that day. We found paw prints in the soft soil, and they were larger than my hands. Later on, we told some friends at school what we saw, and they decided to go looking for what we had found. Ever since that day, these shadow dogs have been sighted all over our area, and I personally hope I never see them again. Number 3. Long Walks. Submitted by LOLA E. I live in Portland, and as some of you may know, there are loads of great hiking trails in our city. I enjoy walking them on lonely nights to get some peace of mind. It can be a stress reliever. I especially like the trails by small rivers. I mean, listening to the rushing of water can intensify that feeling of serenity, that feeling you get when you're alone in the woods. About a year back, I decided I wanted to hike one of those trails. I had gotten into an argument with my boyfriend, and I needed to do something to put my mind at ease. I was 22 at the time. Before that night, I had walked the trail I was going to plenty of times, and nothing ever happened. Nothing out of the ordinary, that is. Despite knowing this, I always brought a pocket knife with me, just in case. I can be a very paranoid or cautious person. Let me try to describe the entrance of this trail. It's been about a year since I've been there, so my memory might be a little rough. There's a lot of grass, a huge open clearing surrounded by woods. Behind you are a bunch of houses, and above you is an old rusty green bridge. There's some kind of modern art-inspired statue on the right of the pathway that leads to the trail. At the time, I believe it was 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I was almost excited to get lost in the sounds and sights of the woods that night, and I began to walk down the trail alone. My destination was the old stone house-like structure located close to the top of the trail. Some people call it the witch's hut. I know that's what I called it when I was a kid. It was covered in graffiti and moss, and the inside smells like pee. After 10 or 20 minutes of walking at a fast pace, I reached the building. Nothing strange had happened up until that point, but I did have this overwhelming feeling of being watched. I caught myself constantly looking back as I walked the trail, but I never heard anything odd, aside from the occasional hooting of an owl. I hadn't seen anything particularly odd either. I sat on a log outside the witch's hut, and behind me was a drop-off covered in bushes and vines, and at the bottom was a small river. I had been facing the hut before I whipped around, startled by a sudden rustling noise that came from below. I looked down, squinting at the river below me, and I kid you not, something came darting out of the bushes from one side and into a bush on the side closest to mine. I didn't know what the heck that thing was, but it somehow managed to scale the cliff in a split second, and I watched it dart around the back of the hut. This all happened so fast, I didn't even have time to react. My heart felt like it was about to explode out of my chest, and I could barely make out any of the thing's features, and I didn't think I really wanted to. My flight instinct kicked into high gear as I sprinted away down the trail. It sounded like there was a second pair of smaller, lighter footsteps in rhythm with my own. This boosted my adrenaline by 10 times or so. My body couldn't keep up that running for much longer. I hadn't heard the footsteps for a few minutes, and I decided to stop and turn around. And that was a huge mistake. Whatever that thing was, it was sitting on a decaying tree stump, staring at me in complete silence. It sat like a dog, but it had the body of a human. Its elbows bent outwards, and it had no hands. Its eyes were 2 tiny, close-together yellow dots, and its head was small and oval. It had no hair. and it was a deep purple color. I felt like I was staring at it, and it was staring at me for hours. Neither of us moved a muscle. It was so crazy and terrifying, I honestly thought I had been imagining things, until it freaking blinked. I finally regained my common sense, and I turned the other way and bolted. I don't think I had ever run that fast in my whole life. When I reached the bottom of the trail, I didn't stop running. Heck no. I leapt into my car and rolled up all the windows, and I stared at that thing one last time. And before my windows were up, I heard the thing hoot, like an owl, just like the owls I had heard on the way to the witch hut. Then this creature turned around and leapt back into the woods, and then there was a flash of white light that came from the forest, and then a low humming noise. It was like nothing I'd ever heard of before. Needless to say, I didn't stick around to find out what it was. I haven't told this story to many, in fear that they'll think I'm crazy or something. I honestly don't know what that thing was. It was almost otherworldly. Owl creature or whatever you were, let's not meet again. Number 4. Shadow Creature. Submitted by Scott D. This happened to my sister and I a while back. I would say back in 2016 during the summer. I'm 28 and my sister is 12. We used to play a game together called Marbles as we waited for Pokemon Go to come out. We live in the southern part of New Hampshire. We would often go out to a place called Clark's Pond, a small pond in the woods where one set of trails was on one side of the road, while there was another set across the road. We took the longer ones across the road. We were out playing the game, catching creatures when it started to get dark. We decided, okay, we had enough, so we began to head back. But as we headed back, we were walking down the path when a black humanoid shape came out from the woods ahead of us. Now, I carried at the time one of those bright fishing lamps, the ones that take the big bulking 6-volt batteries. This thing was crazy bright, and it lit up the woods behind this thing, yet not once did the light illuminate it. And that's when a rush of fear ran over me, and my blood ran cold. My sister, grabbing my arm, begged us to leave, so we took off in the other direction out of the woods, the entire time trying to keep her calm, telling her it had to be one of those other hikers before us. There had been a guy in a red truck who entered as we did, and then we got back to my car, and we noticed that that guy's truck was gone. There was no way that that was the guy from earlier. He would have gotten back to his truck before we got back to my car. Fast forward a few months later, I worked as a delivery driver. I was up past the White Mountains when I saw a creature sitting on the side of the road. It had bright yellow eyes. First, thinking logically, I assumed it to be reflectors. Until it looked at me. It turned and looked, and then it stood up slightly hunched over. The thing stood to be 4 feet tall, and with one quick movement, it took off into the woods. It was so fast, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. Fast forward again about a month later, and 150 miles away, I came across the same type of creature. Its eyes looked like reflectors again, until I drove closer, and this time it stood to be about 5 feet tall. The creature was poking out from behind a telephone pole. I saw its black hand move up the pole with long fingers. And once again, like last time, the thing slowly turned towards the woods, and in the blink of an eye, it was gone. During all 3 of these events, no sort of light ever illuminated the things we saw like they should have. It's as if its body was just one big black mass of nothingness. I've changed jobs since then. I'm a delivery driver at night, and still to this day. While I drive, I constantly scan the woods, especially down the dark rural areas, in case me and my shadow friend ever meet again. Number 5. Something in the Woods. Submitted by THEDRPEPPER. This story takes place in Pictou County, Nova Scotia, Canada. This happened when I was 11. I'm 15 now. The whole ordeal was in the woods right next to the graveyard in my old neighborhood. Like 11-year-olds often do, my friend and I were exploring when we came across what we thought were fresh deer tracks. Curious, we followed the tracks to an abrupt stop. We were on a well-established animal trail, but they just cut off. So me and my friend, who we'll call David, we continued on. We walked for about 15 more minutes and then came across the same tracks, but some of them were almost human. By that I mean they were more human, as in the tracks were changing. It seemed like the thing was growing toes or toe-like appendages. At least that's what it looked like. Obviously, we were getting a bit spooked at the time, not trying to show it, so both of us pushed on. It wasn't 30 seconds later until we saw tufts of white fur. They were all over the branches to our left and right. And that was it. Me and David turned around. And when we did, what we saw has stuck with us for a while. We don't talk about it much anymore, but it still lays in the pit of my stomach. Because when we turned around, we saw what looked like somebody hunched over behind a thorn bush. Then all of a sudden, it didn't even move. It just stood up. I mean, the thing had no animation. One second it was hunched over, and the next it was standing and staring. Better yet, we could make out its dark brown goat or deer legs, and it had the face of a goat with the darkest eyes you could imagine. Its legs ended in some sort of abomination, a mix between cloven hooves and feet. It must have been looking at us for about 5 seconds, but it felt like forever. The thing then ran straight in between us the way we came in. It ran so fast, I thought it was going to attack us. We wanted to get away, and the only way out was the way we came, which also happened to be the way it ran. So rather than getting lost in the woods with this thing, we ran in the same direction to get out of the woods. We were both trembling, and not too long after taking off running, we could hear the rapid clops of hooves behind us. We made it out in less than half the time, and after getting back to David's house, his mother instantly noticed the panic on our faces. We told her what we saw, and she said that it was just a deer. But as cliché as it sounds, I know what we saw. 4 years later, and I still don't walk the paved path next to those woods out of fear of what waits in there. Just understand, you're never alone in the woods, no matter how much you think you are. And number 6, stay out of the woods at night. Submitted by Shy Darkness. The first time I saw this thing was when I was 6 or 7. I was at our old barn with my dad. We were cleaning the barn out. We were going to take the walls off to make it a carport or something like that. So we were walking through the barn. It was your normal creepy barn falling apart. You know, weird noises in the works. There was a black oil barrel cut in half for water for when we used to have pigs. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw something, and I turned to look at it out of instinct. There was something drinking old rainwater that was still in the barrel. It had a head the size of a horse and eyes on top of it, with pupils aimed at me. It was just a quick glance, and then I looked back in the direction I was facing. That's when I realized what I had just seen, so I looked back to where it was, and of course, it was gone. There was nothing there but tall, moving grass. Fast forward a few years later, I'm almost 16 now, and one of our house cats got out and went missing. I was looking in the woods behind the barn at night, so I couldn't see much. It was December, and it was freezing cold, so I went back to my house, which was on the other side of the pasture, which is up the hill from the barn. It was fenced in by barbed wire, so to get through you'd have to find the small gate, or at least a bigger opening between the wire. When I got back into my house, I sat in my room watching TV, warming up for a few hours. Then I got dressed and got a flashlight, the only flashlight which was almost dead. I went back outside and began walking towards the barn that sits just by the pitch-black woods. A few feet down the hill into the woods, I called my cat's name. An hour just standing there calling her name, I gave up, and I started walking back to my house. Just as I turned and was shining the flashlight down the path, there was a glow of an eye, just like when you shine the light into an animal's eyes, and it reflects. Well, my dim flashlight caught that kind of glow, but it was white and there was only one. It looked to face me and then ran into the room in the barn with the only standing walls. At first I thought that it was the cat, so I walked around the bar to the door to that room. There was a hole there where a stubborn mule had once kicked it. I got to the doorway and I looked in, and that one glowing eye was still looking at me. I was beginning to get really scared, so without removing my stare from it, I walked quickly back up the hill. After a certain distance, I finally turned around, but I would still look back over my shoulder to see if I was being followed. I don't think I was. Ever since then, I've always felt like something was watching me, and my attitude changed from always worrying to not caring about anything. This happened a week ago, and I don't leave my room much anymore. But I think whatever I saw when I was 6 or 7 is still here, still watching, still waiting. It scared me to the depths of my soul, knowing whatever that thing was staring right at me. I've lived in the woods almost all my life. Now that I live in the city, things are so different. I remember walking all those old trails. The moment you step foot in the forest, it was a completely different world. The rules of man did not apply there. The small animals you would see would run away from you in confusion or fear. But the animals you did not see have never understood or had the fear for humans. Those creatures are the ones that follow you for a while, sizing you up, wondering how you might taste. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget, you're all awesome, and you make this channel possible. You can send any of your true scary stories at darknessprevails.org. Thanks.